scammers are the scum of our society. They are ruining lives and ripping people off. These criminals aren't wearing balaclavas or wielding a crowbar. Instead, they are sitting anonymously behind their computer screens or on the end of a phone line, often in countries far from here. And every one of us in this place will have met a constituent who has lost out extraordinary sums of money to these scammers. And their stories are heartbreaking. As their federal MP, I have been trying to do everything I can to help them get their money back. But in many of these cases, there's very little that can be done for them once the money's been taken. And hearing of people who have lost huge amounts of money because they've clicked through a link or they've answered the desperate calls of someone who they thought was their daughter who was in distress, and then sent some money off. It's been so sad to hear about the impact this has had on them. And while scams have been around for a long time, in the last few years, they have gotten more sophisticated and more damaging. As technology has advanced, so too have scammers. And with more and more of our personal and financial information being stored online, this has left more opportunities for theft. And none of us are immune from these scams. The stereotype of someone who would get scammed is often someone who's a bit older and maybe not as digitally savvy. But a 2023 Deloitte survey found that actually it was those in the Gen Z and millennial cohorts who are more likely to be scammed than their grandparents. And scammers have become so sophisticated that they managed to convince a financial advice columnist for a New York magazine to put $50,000 of cash in a box and hand it to a stranger because she thought that person was a CIA agent. This is the level of sophistication that we are now getting to. And the piece that she wrote about her experience went viral online because people were sharing their own stories about how they had been scammed. And we have had similar experiences of people coming to my office, a public school teacher who had been scammed of $50,000, a young man who had been working up to save for a deposit on his first home. He lost the deposit entirely. These are heartbreaking stories. But what are we doing? What is the government doing to help protect citizens against these scams? And this bill is part of a broader suite of measures that the government is working on, designed to crack down on scammers and reduce scamming losses right across our country. And I'm really proud of the work that the Labor government is doing because we have made this a significant priority in helping to protect Australians. Foremost in the government's push has been to establish the National Anti-Scam Centre. This is a unique and really first of its kind centre that takes a proactive approach to fight fraud and scams. It's an innovative partnership that unites government agencies, law enforcement and businesses to deploy cutting-edge technology to block scams right at the source. Importantly, the National Anti-Scam Centre has an education function as well, and that's to empower communities and individuals by raising awareness, providing practical tips to safeguard against scammers. And even the initial findings of the Albanese government's crackdown on scammers has had some promising results. According to the National Anti-Scam Centre's second quarterly report, scam losses in October to December of 2023 have almost halved in comparison to the same period just the year prior. So prior to the Albanese government taking office, annual scam losses in Australia exceeded $3 billion. and that was a quadrupling over 3 years. So the amount that was being taken out of people's pockets, $3 billion, that obviously has a huge impact on their lives. And that problem was growing exponentially before we came into government. Since our government's intervention, this trend has reversed. In the first 6 months of the crackdown, we saw significant reductions, with November 2023 reporting a 50% decrease in losses compared to the previous year. This means that the work that we are doing is having an impact. However, we are still losing too much money. People's lives are still getting damaged by scammers, and that we know that there is a lot more work to do. So what I am doing at the local level is ensuring that my community have a good understanding of what scams look like and how they can protect themselves against being scammed. It was a great morning when we held our seniors morning tea recently, and the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones, came along to Burwood Public School to speak to seniors directly about how they can protect themselves and their families from being scammed. And we had about 150 people in the hall that day, and the Assistant Treasurer asked the audience to put their hand up if they had received a scam text, email or online message, and almost everyone in the audience put their hand up. He then asked if anyone knew of anyone who had been scammed, and still there were people who had their hands up. Everyone in that audience had some interaction with a scammer, and that's the unfortunate state that we currently live in. But it's not just individuals and families who are vulnerable to scams, it's also businesses too. And so I invited Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill to join a small business forum that I held, along with Realise Business, who had an expert cyber security speaker there, to help inform small businesses about how they can protect themselves and their customers from being scammed and from hacks. Because we want to make sure that we do everything we can to reduce the losses of scams and make sure that individuals, families and small businesses are not vulnerable to these criminal activities. And it's important to make sure that we minimise the avenues for scammers to approach our community via SMS and MMS as well as online. And according to the department, SMS is now the most frequently reported contact method for scams. As the Fighting Scams consultation paper has noted, we've all become accustomed to receiving SMS from businesses and organisations that we trust. It's estimated that $27 million was lost in scams in 2023 alone, but this figure is likely to be an underestimation as many scams go unreported. That's why in April 2023, the government announced the establishment of an SMS sender register alongside the creation of the National Anti-Scam Centre that sits within the ACCC. These measures were complemented by rules introduced by the Australian Communications and Media Authority, which required companies to block scam text messages. And we know that even during the period from July and December 2022, telcos blocked more than 90 million scam texts. That's 90 million scam texts. We were getting these multiple times a day. So this government knows that we have to keep building on protections for our community. And this is what this bill does. The establishment of the SMS Send Register is designed to fundamentally undermine the business model of SMS scammers. It will help to prevent scammers from impersonating brands and organisations and will start to restore public confidence in SMS as a communications channel. Under a potentially mandatory model, all organisations sending text messages with letter-based sender IDs to Australian mobile phones would need to register these IDs. This would apply to both Australian and overseas senders. Phone companies would also have to follow up new regulations which would require them to either block messages from unregistered senders or add a warning label to these messages saying they might be scams. For the person receiving the SMS, this would prevent people from receiving SMS from scammers claiming to be a particular company or organisation. It would allow receivers of SMS to trust that when a text message says it's from the ATO, that it is actually from the ATO. And where an entity is not registered, it would require the telcos to send a scam warning alongside it. So there's more work for us to do, but we've already started the really important work of helping to safeguard our community from these scammers. And education is the big piece here, to ensure that individuals are not susceptible to falling prey to these scammers. I'm going to continue to hold anti-scam forums across my community to help individuals and small businesses keep on the lookout for these scam messages. And if there's anything that I could leave the community with, it's that there are 3 simple things you can do to help protect yourself. One is to ensure that you have a complicated password by trying to use a passphrase instead of a password. The other is to ensure that you have 2-factor authentication, and you can set that up to ensure that it is much harder for scammers to access your banking or financial details. And the other is to check if someone were to send you an email or an SMS, instead of clicking through to the link, call the organisation or institution that is trying to get into contact with you. And in the words of Lillian, who came to my seniors' morning tea, where Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones was speaking about the problem of scams, the one thing that she took out of that anti-scam forum is do not click on the blue link in that email or SMS. So in the words of Lillian, keep that in mind. Do not click on the blue link.